Hot liquid hits her arm. She screams. I turn. Coffee drips off her sleeve. Her wig slides sideways. Oh my God! Watch where you're going! The woman in the cobalt blazer snaps. My wife's hand is shaking. Her skin is burned red. She has no hair to hide behind, no strength to argue back. She has cancer, I say. Quiet, steady. Not my problem, the woman says. Some of us paid for first class. My wife looks at me, scared, embarrassed, ashamed of a body that betrayed her twice this year, once to chemo, once to a stranger's carelessness. I feel my pulse in my throat. I feel 22 years of restraint holding a door shut inside my chest. The woman crosses her arms. She looks at my wife like she's an inconvenience, not a person. Someone should really teach her some manners, she says to the flight attendant, loud enough for 3 rows to hear. I say nothing, not yet, but she has no idea what she just started. But to understand why this moment changed everything, I need to take you back to where this all began. My name doesn't matter yet. What matters is who I was sitting next to. Her name is Marissa. She is my wife of 14 years, and 6 months ago, a doctor said the word stage 3 in a small room with bad lighting, and our entire life folded into a single appointment calendar. That morning, we were flying to Denver for a second opinion at a specialty cancer center. It was supposed to be simple. Get on a plane. Hold her hand during turbulence. Get her checked in for treatment that might actually work this time. That was the whole plan. Nothing complicated. Nothing that required bravery beyond boarding a flight. Marissa used to run marathons. She used to laugh so loud that strangers in restaurants turned around and smiled instead of getting annoyed. Now she got tired walking from the gate to the jet bridge. Now she wore a soft cotton beanie because the wig itched her scalp, raw from months of infusions. She still smiled at strangers. She still thanked flight attendants by name. Cancer took her hair and her stamina, but it never touched the best parts of her. I had spent 2 decades learning how to stay calm when everything around me was on fire, so a delayed flight and a cramped cabin didn't scare me. What scared me was watching my wife get smaller every week and feeling powerless to stop it. The cabin that morning felt almost peaceful. Soft overhead lighting. The low hum of the engines. A businessman across the aisle reading quietly. A mother with a sleeping toddler 2 rows up. Marissa had the window seat because she liked watching the clouds. She said clouds looked like the only honest thing left in the world. Always changing, never pretending to be something else. I checked her water bottle. I checked her medication bag. I checked the small folded blanket tucked against her knees. Small rituals. Quiet proof that I was still useful to her, even when medicine wasn't. 22 years of training had taught me how to read a room before it turned dangerous. I didn't know yet that I would need that instinct before we even reached cruising altitude. Everything felt ordinary. Ordinary was rare enough lately that I wanted to hold on to it. Then the boarding line stalled, and a voice from the jet bridge sliced through it. She stepped onto the plane like she already owned the aisle. Late 40s, maybe 50. Bleached blonde hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful. Cobalt blue blazer. Matching trousers. Gold jewelry that clinked when she moved, like she wanted you to hear her coming before you saw her. Her heels struck the floor hard enough to announce her. Her chin was already tilted up before she'd said a single word. She stopped at row 3 and looked at the overhead bin like it had personally offended her. "This is unacceptable," she said to no one and everyone. "I specifically requested extra bin space." The flight attendant, a young man with a patient smile, offered to help rearrange a bag. "I don't need help," she snapped. "I need people to follow simple instructions." A few passengers exchanged glances. The kind of glance that says, "Here we go." I noticed her the way you notice weather turning. Not alarming yet, just a pressure change in the air. She scanned the cabin like she was looking for her next problem to solve by creating one. Her eyes moved past the businessman, past the sleeping toddler. Then they landed on Marissa's bare scalp beneath her thin cotton beanie, and something in her expression shifted from irritation to interest. Oh no, she noticed her. She sat 1 row ahead of us, angled her whole body around the seat back, and looked at Marissa like she was inspecting a stain on a hotel carpet. "Is she contagious?" she asked the flight attendant, pointing without lowering her voice. Marissa's hand tightened around mine. I kept my voice level. "She's not contagious. She has cancer." "Well, I didn't ask you," the woman said. "I asked him." The flight attendant tried to explain that everything was fine, that there was nothing unusual happening, that we could all just get settled for takeoff. She overrode him instantly. "I would like a different seat. I am not comfortable sitting near." She waved a hand at Marissa's beanie. "That." Marissa looked down at her lap. I watched 14 years of her fierce, unstoppable spirit shrink into something smaller than I had ever seen. I told myself, not here, not yet, choose peace. But something in my chest had already started keeping score. The captain announced final boarding. The woman refused to lower her voice, refused to drop the subject, refused every attempt at de-escalation from the crew. She told another passenger to mind their own business when he gently suggested she calm down. She told the flight attendant she would have his job by tonight. I sat with my jaw tight, my hand resting over Marissa's, feeling the tremor still running through her fingers. "You okay?" I whispered. She nodded, but her eyes were wet. "I just wanted one normal day," she said. That sentence would replay in my mind for the rest of the flight. 3 minutes later, everything got worse. Once we reached cruising altitude, the woman demanded her seat be reclined immediately, though the seatbelt sign hadn't turned off yet. When the young man near her declined to move his knees back for her comfort, she called him entitled without a hint of irony. She snapped photos of other passengers for evidence when they didn't do what she wanted. She told a mother to control that child, though the toddler was fast asleep. She complained the cabin was too cold, then too warm, then too bright, then too loud. Each complaint delivered like a verdict rather than a request. Marissa tried to disappear into her window seat, watching the clouds the way she always did, using them as an anchor to something calmer than the cabin around her. I studied Marissa's exhaustion instead of the woman's tantrum. My wife had spent that morning throwing up from the nausea medication before we even left the house. She had forced a smile getting into the car. She had told me she was excited for Denver, using the last of her energy to protect me from her fear. The woman in cobalt blue had no idea what quiet strength looked like. She only recognized loud. When the drink cart came through, she ordered a large hot tea, then complained it wasn't hot enough, then demanded it be reheated immediately, though there was no way to do that mid-flight. The flight attendant apologized and offered a fresh cup instead. She grabbed it too fast. Her wrist jerked, and the tea splashed sideways, over the armrest, over the aisle, and onto my wife's exposed forearm and the delicate skin still healing from her latest infusion site. Marissa gasped. Her whole arm flared red. She pulled back hard enough to hit her elbow on the window frame. I was already moving before I decided to move. "She's burned," I said, low and controlled, reaching for the small first aid kit in my bag. The woman looked at the spilled cup like it had betrayed her personally. "Oh my God, watch where you're going," she snapped at Marissa, at my wife, as if she had caused her own injury. "She didn't move," I said. "You did." "Excuse me?" Her voice rose an octave. "Do you know who I am?" I didn't answer. I was pressing a cool cloth against Marissa's arm, checking the burn, watching her blink back tears she refused to let fall in public. One passenger nearby leaned over. "Ma'am, maybe just apologize," he said gently. "I don't owe her an apology," she snapped, jabbing a finger toward Marissa. She should have been paying attention instead of just sitting there. A woman across the aisle muttered, "She has cancer. Are you serious right now?" "Not my problem," the woman in cobalt blue said. "Some of us paid for first class." Marissa's voice came out small. "I'm okay," she told me, though her eyes said otherwise. I looked at the burn on her arm. I looked at her trembling hands. I looked at 14 years of partnership, sitting there quietly absorbing cruelty because she didn't have the strength left to fight it herself. Something cold and precise settled into my chest. Not rage. Something steadier than rage. The flight attendant returned with ice and antiseptic wipes, apologizing repeatedly, clearly rattled. He asked the woman in cobalt blue if she'd like to switch seats to give my wife space to recover. Absolutely not, she said. I'm not moving because SHE can't handle a little tea. Someone near the back pulled out a phone. Quiet, discreet, recording. I dabbed the burn gently, keeping my voice soft only for Marissa. You're doing great, I told her. Almost there. She squeezed my hand. Don't make a scene, she whispered. Please, I just want to get to Denver. I nodded. I meant it when I said okay. I did not know yet how wrong that promise would turn out to be. For the next 20 minutes, the woman in cobalt blue treated the burn like an inconvenience to her flight experience rather than an injury she'd caused. She complained to the flight attendant that some people were too sensitive. She rolled her eyes when Marissa flinched, adjusting her sleeve. She loudly informed her seatmate that she was on the board of her homeowners association back home and knew exactly how to handle entitled people. Apparently unaware of the irony dripping from every word, Marissa kept her eyes on the clouds. I kept my hand on her arm, monitoring the burn, monitoring my own pulse. The flight attendant, clearly uncomfortable, offered Marissa a complimentary first-class care kit and apologized on behalf of the airline. The woman scoffed loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Must be nice getting free stuff for a little spill, she said. Marissa didn't respond. She didn't have the energy to respond. I felt that silence in my own bones. And what she did 20 minutes later made even the flight attendants stop breathing. The captain announced a short delay due to weather ahead, asking everyone to remain seated with belts fastened a bit longer than expected. The woman in cobalt blue groaned theatrically, then turned her attention back to Marissa like a predator circling something wounded. You know, she said, leaning over the seat back again, if you're that sick, maybe you shouldn't be flying at all. Some of us don't want to catch whatever you've got. She has cancer, I said again, my voice flat. It's not contagious. I don't care what it is, she snapped. It's disgusting to look at, honestly. The bald head, she gestured vaguely at Marissa's face. Whole thing. Some people have no shame. A woman too rose back, gasped audibly. Are you serious right now? I am completely serious, Cobalt Blazer said, chin lifted. I paid for a pleasant flight, not a sad story. Marissa's composure finally cracked. A single tear slid down her cheek, and she turned toward the window so no one would see it. But I saw it, and something in me went very, very quiet. The businessman across the aisle stood halfway out of his seat. Lady, that is beyond messed up. Sit down and shut your mouth. Don't tell me what to do, she snapped back. I will have you removed from this flight. You're the one who should be removed, someone else muttered. The flight attendant, visibly shaken, asked her to please lower her voice and stop addressing other passengers directly. She ignored him entirely, turning back to Marissa. Actually, she said, voice rising with theatrical outrage, I want her moved. I paid for first-class comfort, and I am not comfortable sitting next to a walking biohazard. The cabin went dead silent except for the low hum of engines. Marissa's shoulders shook, not from anger. From humiliation, she had no strength left to fight. I reached over and took her hand. My voice, when it came, was quiet, level, final. That's enough, I said. She laughed. An ugly, dismissive bark of a laugh. Or what? And who do you think you are? I said nothing for 3 full seconds. I let the silence stretch until it filled every row. I reached into my jacket. My fingers found the worn leather edge of a small folder I had carried for 11 years. The one I rarely needed to use. The one that had never once failed to change a room's temperature the moment it opened. I set it flat on the tray table. Gold letters. Federal seal. A photograph of my own face, 12 years younger, staring back at everyone who leaned to look. My name is on record, I said quietly, as a sitting federal judge, appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. I have spent 2 decades in courtrooms listening to people justify cruelty. I recognize it instantly now. A gasp rippled backward through the cabin. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" A phone lowered slightly, then rose again to keep recording. The woman's face changed in stages. First confusion, then disbelief, her mouth opening without sound. Then the color drained from her cheeks, leaving her makeup looking suddenly harsh and out of place. Her hands, moments ago so confident, began twisting the strap of her designer bag. That doesn't... I didn't know," she stammered. "I would never have said anything if I'd known you were." "You would have said it anyway," I said. "You just would have said it to someone without a badge." "I wasn't trying to be rude," she said, voice climbing toward panic. Flights are stressful and I cut her off with one sentence. "You scalded a cancer patient and called her a biohazard. There is no version of stressed that explains that." One woman near the back said what everyone else was thinking. "She's been like this since she got on the plane. We all saw it." Cobalt Blazer stood there, alone in the aisle she'd once owned, stripped of every ounce of the confidence she'd worn like armor 20 minutes earlier. Now she was just a woman standing in a narrow space, exposed, with no one left on her side. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom minutes later, calm and procedural. "Ground security has been notified and will meet the aircraft upon arrival," he said. "We appreciate everyone's patience." The flight attendant approached with a small notepad, hand steadier now. "Ma'am, I'll need your name and seat number for the incident report." "This is ridiculous," she said, though her voice had lost its edge. "It was an accident." "An accident wouldn't have included the comments you made afterward," he replied evenly. The businessman across the aisle held up his phone. "I have it all recorded, if that helps." "So do I," said the woman 2 rows back. Cobalt Blazer's eyes darted around the cabin, searching for an ally who no longer existed. Every face that met hers held the same expression: disgust, disbelief, and a flicker of satisfaction that justice, for once, seemed close enough to touch. The remainder of the flight passed in an odd, charged quiet. The captain kept the cabin informed in short, professional updates. Marissa's arm was properly bandaged by a passenger who turned out to be an off-duty nurse, who also gently reassured her that the burn, while painful, wasn't severe enough to leave lasting damage. I sat beside my wife, arm around her shoulders, feeling her breathing slow for the first time in an hour. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "I did." She almost smiled. "Judge," she said softly, testing the word like she was trying it on for the first time in a long time. "I forget sometimes. I try to leave it at the office," I said. "But some situations bring it home." When we landed, 2 airport security officers boarded before general deplaning began. They walked directly to row 3. "Ma'am, we need you to step off the aircraft with us," one officer said. "On what grounds?" she demanded, though her voice cracked on the last word. "Multiple passenger complaints, in-flight harassment, and an unresolved injury to another passenger," the officer said. "You're being detained for questioning. Airline security will also be filing a formal incident report with corporate." "This is insane," she said, gathering her bag with shaking hands. "I'll sue. I know people." "You're welcome to retain counsel," the officer said flatly. "Right now, you need to come with us." The cabin watched in silence as she was walked up the aisle, past rows of passengers who had witnessed every ugly moment of her performance. No one looked away. No one offered sympathy. The businessman actually stood and gave her a slow, unimpressed nod, the kind reserved for people who finally got what they'd been asking for all along. At the jet bridge, an airline manager was waiting with a clipboard. "Ma'am, based on passenger statements and video evidence, you are being permanently banned from this airline, effective immediately," she said. "Additional consequences will depend on the investigation." Cobalt Blazer said nothing. For the first time since she'd boarded, she had nothing left to say. The cabin exhaled the moment she was gone. The air felt different, lighter, like a held breath finally released. Passengers began speaking to each other in soft voices, the kind of low chatter that follows a storm. Several stopped by our row on their way out. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," the nurse said to Marissa, gently checking her bandage one more time. "You handled that with more grace than most people could manage." The businessman shook my hand. "Thank you for stepping in the way you did. Most people would have just watched." A young woman, maybe 20, paused beside Marissa's seat. "I lost my mom to cancer last year," she said quietly. "Seeing you get treated like that made me so angry. But seeing how you carried yourself, it meant something. Thank you." Marissa's eyes filled again, but this time the tears were different, softer. She reached out and squeezed the young woman's hand. I checked Marissa's arm one more time, adjusting the bandage, brushing my thumb gently over her knuckles. "You okay?" I asked. "I will be," she said. "I think I actually will be." We sat there a moment longer, letting the cabin empty around us, letting the noise settle into something calmer. I thought about all the years I had spent in courtrooms, watching people justify their worst behavior with the same tired excuses. Stress, misunderstanding, bad day. I had learned that cruelty rarely needs a reason. It only needs an audience willing to stay silent. Today, the audience hadn't stayed silent. And for the first time in a long while, that gave me hope. 3 weeks later, the airline's investigation concluded. The woman, whose name turned out to be Deborah Whitfield, a name she'd repeated to nearly a dozen passengers as though it should mean something, was formally banned from every airline operating under that corporate umbrella. Local news picked up the story after several passengers shared their recordings, and within days her employer, a boutique real estate firm, issued a statement distancing itself from her personal conduct, followed shortly by her quiet resignation. Her own homeowners association, the same one she'd bragged about running with an iron fist, launched a review of her position on the board after residents recognized her from the viral clips. She stepped down there too, though step down might be generous. Neighbors later described it as being asked, firmly, not to return. Marissa's arm healed within a few weeks, leaving a small mark that she now calls her souvenir from the sky, always followed by a small, tired laugh. Her second opinion in Denver led to a revised treatment plan, one that her new oncologist believed offered a real fighting chance. She began treatment there the following month, and for the first time in a long while, we both allowed ourselves to feel something like hope instead of just endurance. The videos from that flight spread further than either of us expected. Strangers reached out to Marissa, sharing their own stories of feeling dismissed or humiliated during treatment, thanking her for the quiet dignity she'd shown even in her worst moment. One woman messaged to say she'd finally reported a coworker who mocked her hair loss after seeing how Marissa handled her own encounter with cruelty. A small ripple, but a real one. As for me, I went back to my courtroom the following Monday, back to black robes and careful rulings, back to the quiet authority I usually keep separate from my personal life. But something had shifted. I found myself a little less patient with cruelty disguised as entitlement, a little quicker to name it when I saw it, both on the bench and off. Looking back now, months removed from that flight, I understand the moment differently than I did in the middle of it. It was never really about a badge or a title or the weight of an ID folder landing on a tray table. It was about a woman who had spent her whole life mistaking loudness for power, meeting a room that had simply, finally stopped listening to her. Marissa still watches clouds from airplane windows. She says they remind her that turbulence always passes, that calm always returns if you're patient enough to wait for it. I believe her more than I used to. Some people mistake silence for weakness. They see patience and call it fear. But some of us have learned that the most powerful answer to cruelty isn't rage. It's calm. It's prepared. It's inevitable justice, arriving exactly when it's needed, and never a moment before. If the story reminded you that dignity outlasts every cruel voice that tries to drown it out, you already know what to do.